But so I'm very excited to get to be talking with the two most powerful journalists in advertising, Suzanne Vranica of the Wall Street Journal and Laura Petrecca of USA Today. Please join me. So
you lied.
About which part? No.
She promised mimosas. We should leave.
I did, but no.
Where are the drinks? We'll stay.
Later. Okay. So I think we should just get started because both of you sort of have exciting things to talk about with expanded coverage and some new things happening. So Suze, why don't we start with you, and then Laura, you can tell us a little bit about where the coverage is right now.
Okay, so I guess about a month ago, or it feels like 6 years ago, we quietly launched something called CMO Today. It's an entire vertical dedicated to marketing advertising coverage. And the reason we did this was we saw that there was a big hole in the market. And most of the marketers that I know were telling us about the confusion that they had about the marketplace and how they didn't really know where to go for answers, like who's winning in this crazy landscape. You all saw the Lumascape that was put up. That's still existing and still multiplying today. And there's no clear sign when it's going to end. So we figured it's a good time to sort of jump in and figure out how we can shed light on what's working and what's not, who's winning and who's losing. We've hired 4 new reporters as part of that. Plenty of people that you all know, Mike Shields from Adweek. Natalie's here. She's going to be covering up some of the agency business. We also have Jack Marshall, who comes from Digiday. And then there's Steven Perlberg, who comes from Business Insider. So it's a really exciting time, and I think you should all take a lot of time to get to know each and every one of these reporters because they're really amazing.
Laura?
So at USA Today, our advertising, marketing, and media coverage has evolved greatly from what it once was. So back years ago, we had 1 or 2 beat reporters. So those of you in the room may remember Teresa Howard, or you remember even back to the day of Dottie Enrico and Melanie Wells, Martha Moore. Now we have Bruce Horowitz covering a lot of the marketing side of things. So a company coming out with a new product, a new ad campaign, some type of quirky promotion in the city. I pitch in on that, as well as doing a lot of coverage around Super Bowl and the Cannes Ad Festival. But we also have many other outlets within USA Today covering advertising, marketing, media. For example, Shannon Green does a feature called Zoom In which she profiles viral ads that are going wild out there. We also have our tech team really honing in on advertising as it relates to Facebook and Twitter and other social media sites out there. And then we also have columnists, and many of you know Michael Wolff, so he's writing for us. We have another writer as well. It's our media editor, Rem Ryder. He's amazing. So instead of just having 1 or 2 people that cover the industry, we have a wide array of people. So it makes your job a little harder, I know, but if you ever get in a pickle about who to pitch, just email me and I'll help you out.
So we were talking earlier, we started the day talking to Bob Safian from Fast Company about things that are interesting to him and compelling story-wise. And I'd just like to ask both of you, start with you, Laura, what are the kind of things that are most interesting to you that we can share with you?
So some of the things that really stand out for me and resonate among the hundreds of emails I get a day are consumer insights. I love getting consumer insights. So if your firm did a study and you found something really interesting that you think could be blown up to a bigger level, I'm really interested in that, like McCann's Truth Central and other types of consumer studies. I'll give you an example. Last year, Holly Rapello emailed me to say that her ad agency did a study on what people think of their first names, whether you like your first names or you don't like your first name. So that in itself was interesting, but I built upon that, and I found out that Social Security was releasing its list of the most popular baby names in a couple weeks after she had emailed me. So I said, can we hold off? And I'll tie it into that news peg. And then to make the story even more interesting, I interviewed people with unusual names like Star Jones to find out what they thought of their first name. So it was just a simple email with an interesting consumer insight, and it turned into a great story. So I'm very interested in consumer insights. I'm interested in behind-the-scenes details. So if there's going to be a merger, or in a recent case, not a merger, I want to know what people are doing in the rooms behind the scenes. What are they eating? What did they wear? What did they do that morning before they met up? When I interviewed Ariana Huffington and Tim Armstrong about those two companies coming together. I asked them where the initial meeting took place and what Ariana asked him, and she actually had him over to her place for lunch, and she asked him what type of food he doesn't eat, and he said mushrooms. And I put that in the story because those are the details that really make something stand out. And then finally, what I also find really compelling, and so does USA Today, enough that we often put these stories on the front page of the newspaper, is anything with an unusual trend. And I'll just give you an example of that, or an unusual happening. For example, as many of you know, this past fall, we had the convergence of Thanksgiving and the first day of Hanukkah, which was deemed Thanksgivika. So many marketers were coming up with menorahs that are shaped like turkeys and lots of interesting products that they were trying to sell. So then that tied into marketing, media, advertising in terms of how they're getting their products out there. So it's consumer insights, insight details, and quirky trends, quirky stories.
Suzanne?
So all the 50-page research studies, please send them to Laura.
Anything, no summary, the whole thing with the Excel spreadsheet.
They're all your coming to you. So obviously we both have very different audiences. I think what we really look for is a more of a business skew. So we often get pitched stories about, hey, this company is doing X, they're promoting this. We never get the why. Do the homework. It'll help you. What we really want to know is why. Why is this so critical? Well, because this company's stock is down 50% and they haven't made a profit yet. That's why they're doing X marketing. And those are the things that you need to bring to attention to us because, you know, we're going through 100,000 emails and that's not something that's going to stand out. You know, hey, we've, you know, got a crazy clown on our ads is really not something, we're just going to pass it by. The other big thing that we're looking for is stories about what doesn't work, like I mentioned before. So we've been doing lots of stories about advertising fraud, right? How are agencies and how are marketers dealing with advertising fraud online? That's a huge, big theme. Again, the merger stuff, anything inside, what's going on? We had a big page one story about that this merger wasn't gonna happen the Saturday before, saying there's these two CEOs are really fighting and that's a big problem. And lo and behold, you know, based on the quotes, that was the problem. So anything about how companies are reacting to news within your companies, how are agencies dealing with the change that's happening, right? Years ago it was, okay, we had 5 different things that our creative department needed to do. Now there's 50 different platforms and every new platform thinks they're gonna create something, agencies are gonna create something special for them. Well, guess what? Not so much. So how are you dealing with that? Are you hiring different people? Are you coming to Facebook and telling them, look, we don't really have the capacity to create something special for you, so we can take a TV ad and here's what we can do. Those are the inside the agency stories that I think Natalie would be really interested to learn about. She's doing a lot of stories about how agencies and companies are changing based on what's out there. I think that's what I think everybody wants to know. Like everybody has this impression of what an agency does, and it's changing so quickly. And the big question is, are they keeping up? You know, based on what you read, maybe not. But I think a lot of you have really interesting stories how you are changing that aren't being told. So keep that in the back of your head when you're thinking about it. The other big thing is technology, right? How is technology upending this entire business? I think we've been chronicling that for 5 years, and it's really not going to stop. Everything's been turned upside down. So think about those big stories. Real-time marketing. How does an agency do it? What do they do? Who do they hire? Those are some of the themes that we're really looking to crack down on. And again, M&A and how that's going to affect this whole business. Are we going to see some more consolidation? And what does that mean for an agency brand in the midst of this massive consolidation? How do you reassure clients that you're still the agency that you once were and, part of a bigger entity? I think these are all relevant topics for us.
Just as a small question, something Lisa mentioned before when we were talking with Bob Safian, what's the best way to get in touch? And he said, email me, but I probably won't get back to you because I get so many emails, which as PR people, well, at least I know is a problem for me all the time. What about the follow-up? Like, what is the best way to reach you? And if we don't hear from you, how do we know you got our email?
Okay, technology really works. We definitely got your email. There's really no need to call and say, did you get my email? And there's also no real reason to send 3 other emails to say, did you get my email? I promise, I look at most of them. I'm not going to respond, and I honestly wish I could. I can't. I mean, I honestly get thousands, and it's insane. I literally get a note from Microsoft every day that they're going to lock me down and never let me have any more emails. So I do think if you know me and you know what I like, and people in this room, there are plenty of them that do, call me. it's one sentence. You know if you have a story that you can tell me in one sentence and you know it's going to make a difference and you know it's going to get in the paper. And you only learn that by reading everything we write.
And I actually agree. I get thousands of emails as well. And I will tell you, honestly, back in the day, I tried to reply to everyone who sent me a note, but then I would never get any work done, ever. And I not only cover advertising, marketing, media, I'm on the breaking news team at USA Today. So every story I do, I end up on the email list for the Malaysian Airlines plane that's missing, the South Korean ferry. I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I'm on that I'm still on their distribution list because I covered a story once. Thousands and thousands of emails. I do like one follow-up. I actually like capital letters. Follow-up, all capital, colon. It'll stand out in my mind, in my inbox. Sometimes people actually follow up 4 to 5 times, which then annoys me. I understand. I will say, usually by the second follow-up, I'll send back a note that says, no thanks, if once someone follows up the second time. But generally, technology does work, and we are getting the emails.
Although I will say, at CP+B, we have such an overactive, spam filter. Half the time I don't get Chuck Porter's emails. I
wouldn't want Chuck's emails.
Right. Well, there's another story. So both USA Today and the Wall Street Journal started out simply as newspapers in print, and now, you have great online presences, and the opportunity to break news or, have stories online, obviously it's so much quicker in real time. How do you decide what you need to break online and what you're going to put in the paper? And I'd love to hear from both of you. Maybe Suzanne, you want to start?
Sure. There is no deadline anymore. It's real time. It is what it is. Look, we try and hold stuff for the paper because all of you still, no matter how much you want to say real time and the web, the first question is, will it be in print? And I'm like, oh my God. The good news is that the CMO Journal, CMO Today, every Monday, the best of CMO Journal goes into the paper as well, which is really great. So for all you that have clients that say, I only want it in the paper, now you can say that. Deadlines happen. We always want something. We're going more for big stories that go on page 1, as a lot of you have seen. We've had a rash of them lately. So there's times where I know I can feel comfortable about holding something that's big enough. But often what happens, and I could just give you an example, I don't even know what day of the week it is, so I'll pretend that this happened. We knew that the Publicis merger with Omnicom was breaking down. We were working it all morning, and we pretty much were alone. We knew that it was too quiet, nobody was calling around. All of a sudden, we just got nervous. And that would have just waited. Years ago, we would have waited to put that in the paper, and we didn't. We pushed it at 6:45 or 6 o'clock at night, pushed it out on the wires. That's the other big thing. I don't know if all of you are aware. The Journal also has a news wire that goes out to every sort of analyst, investor, so they get a heads up and stock can move. So every time you put a story in the paper, there's always a stock movement that's associated with most times. So keep that in mind just when you're starting to pitch, because it's something you should really be thinking about. So that's a story that literally we were sort of hesitating, should we hold, and we just decided to push. Very rarely do you hold unless you're really comfortable. So yeah, it's as real time as you can get. And believe me, if the IPG is in the house, they know how real time it could get.
And I agree completely. It's 24/7, real time. Very rarely will we hold something. If we have an exclusive interview, we may hold that for the paper in the morning, but then we'll put it out at 6 a.m. online. So whatever's in the paper is going to be online as well. I feel like in this day and age with so much competition, so much going on out there, we can't afford to hold things. Sometimes I'll think about, oh, should I hold this, should I not? And then I get a tweet from someone who's onto it already. So right now it's a whole new news environment. I will say from a journalist standpoint and working with public relations officials, what's interesting is how we can get confirmation of the news faster than ever. So back in the day, I'm so old, but back in the day, I only had someone's home number and their work number, maybe if I was lucky, their number at their vacation rental in the Hamptons. But now I have their cell number to call them. I have an email which reaches them. If I get desperate, I can text them. I can send them a note to their Twitter file. And companies are better than ever in responding to news via a Facebook post. Yes, we know about this, and this is our comment. XYZ on this, PDQ on that, sending out things on Twitter. So it does make our job a little bit easier when I'm covering breaking news. I find a lot of times I panic for a moment, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get confirmation of this? And then I'm like, wait, let me just go to their Facebook page, and there's sometimes a note up there. So it's a crazy busy world. But I do feel like everybody across the board is responding faster than ever.
And you have to be. If the fact is, the Journal has a really high standard about making sure we ask for comment. Even if your company is mentioned, you know, when I do a story about advertising and we mention a bunch of brands, we always give a heads up to the companies that we're mentioning them. That's just our style. The Journal's been that. But as we moved into this real-time marketing, that's something that's really difficult to do. So when you get a call and when you see an email, realize that as much as we give you that courtesy, you have to move more quickly, because we will not hold as much as we used to. We give you as much time, and then we'll update your story with your comment once you get back. But I think the worst thing, you know, given that the profession you're all in, is to have a note, you know, couldn't be reached for comment. I think that's just the worst for any of you to have, and I think, you know, most of you in the room I know pretty well, and I can get to you, but I think for sort of more junior people coming up, that's a big issue, because you don't have the time. You have to be ready at all. You know, my aunt's in the back of the room. I literally was calling somebody on a cell phone from Metro North this morning trying to get a story out. I mean, it's just that crazy right now.
Yeah, 24/7, trying to get comment all the time. And I will say that's what makes us stand out when you're looking at the competition out there in terms of going to reading something from a blog or reading something from another news site, that we do try to reach out and we do want to get that comment and we do want to get that feedback. I teach journalism students, graduate students for journalism, and I always want to be first, but more importantly, I want to be right and I want to be fair and I want to get fair comment. So I do feel like that's the thing with technology now. At least I can reach out to people and say, hey, I'm mentioning your company. Do you have a comment? Do you not? And actually, I'm surprised at how quickly people respond. So I think we're a society of people that don't get a lot of sleep, but we are responding quickly to news.
I mean, you both really bring up a really interesting point, which is, you know, you both work for very highly respected news sources, and yet now with the race to get news and break news and bloggers breaking news and people that don't have the same standards breaking news in the same way, and yet the news is all, you know, is presented as the same, it must make it very tricky.
I don't think it's tricky at all.
No?
I really don't think it's tricky. I think if you have standards and you adhere to them, it's not tricky. I grew up in a place that was adamant about getting it right. There is no maybe. There is no 99%. I mean, if you were in my office the day that we were figuring out that this merger had been pulled apart, the level of scrutiny, the level of lawyering, the level of everything, we have to be right. I mean, I am sick. When I put a story into the paper, I'm sick to my stomach. Even though I know I have 15 sources, there's something in my stomach. And I think every journalist should have that.
And I agree, and I tell my students this too. You are representing your brand, your newspaper, but you're also representing yourself. Like, this is it. We've worked in the industry a long time, and this is my name and my reputation, and if it takes an extra 10 minutes for me to get a source, that's what's going to take. And it's hard because you got a lot of pressure from up above, but you really have to stand firm in your beliefs and be confident. And I think that also comes with age, too, and experience, that you can say to somebody, I'm sorry, I can't put it out there yet, or I can't retweet that other publication's Twitter posting about XYZ because I'm not comfortable with that yet. So it is a new world, but if you stand grounded in who you are and what you believe in, then it's not so difficult to make those decisions.
We put headlines out and literally on mergers and deals, and literally people from the company at POG, we'll call it POG, were calling and saying, is this true? Like, I'm like, we put headlines out. There's no way you're going to see a headline. And yeah, mistakes can happen, but we don't go with first one source very often. I mean, it's a pretty tough competitive world, but I think if you work at a place like we work, you know, accuracy is paramount.
What role does social media play in terms of you figuring out stories? Are you looking on Twitter? Are you seeing what people are talking about to help you decide your stories?
Oh, definitely. And I'll tell you, not only from the advertising, marketing, media standpoint, when I do like a kind of a fun story about Kmart shipped my pants, and I'll see how people are responding online to that. As I mentioned, I cover a lot of breaking news for USA Today. Social media is so big in terms of seeing what's going on. The missing Malaysian plane, I literally was on Twitter seeing what officials from Malaysia are tweeting, seeing what officials from other areas are tweeting. Oh, what's somebody from the airline saying? I am on social media constantly, not only getting news, but also a couple weeks ago, I was asked to help out the money team in terms of improving our social media profile. So now I'm on the other side of it, sending out our news and our headlines. So it plays a gigantic role in terms of engaging readers and getting information.
I agree. I mean, it's basically upended the entire journalism and how we all operate. I will say you have to be super careful, though. The thing about Twitter that people don't understand is because it can be a very, especially in this business, like there's two ways to look at it. For this particular room, we are dominant on Twitter. Media, advertising, public relations, it tends to be an echo chamber. So you have to be really careful, especially as a journalist. Like there was something, I think, about Super Bowl, I don't remember what it was, but somebody put out an ad and everybody's like, oh my God, this is racist and blah, blah, blah. And I think somebody would probably help but explain the backstory of this because the agency's here. And I was like, oh my God, I got to write a story. This is racist. And I don't even do many of those stories. But I'm like, and then I said, like, let's stop. Like, who's saying it's racist? So I quickly called a company to measure, you know, one of those, hey, we can measure the sentiment. And we found out only 1% of the traffic was actually complaining about it because it was all the media and all the pundits sort of complaining and sort of fueling this thing. And there really wasn't the consumer. So I think in your jobs, like, yes, you have to be responding to Twitter as well as we do, but I think we all have to realize, like, it's 16% of the population or whatever the figure is, so don't quote me on that. It's still small, and you have to keep that in mind, especially if who you're following. Realize, and I would suggest following more different people from different industries. Who are your clients? Follow people in those industries, because then your chamber that you're watching is larger, and you don't feel the fact that, oh my God, this is a really big issue, because in likelihood, it's probably not. So everything that she said, totally on point, but just keep that other idea, and because we found that this echo chamber can really get people to write stories that really are not actually true.
Do you ever, I know, Laura, sometimes you post on Facebook if you're writing a story and anybody, you know, can contribute to it, but do you ever look at companies, you know, pages on Facebook, or really you're more in the real time of Twitter?
I'll look every once in a while. I do not post what I'm working on. I come under SEC guidelines because of what we're writing is market moving. So I have to be very careful about what I tweet and what I'm working on. I also think you have to be very careful, unless you're looking for consumers, then I can see why that would be helpful. But so I don't necessarily usually say, hey, I'm working on this. There is other newspapers that are presenting here that sometimes do that, and I love it because then we all know what they're working on. So that's great.
I guess you're not going to do that anymore.
But from a company's, I literally am not going to Facebook to find out what I'm saying. I think, like, you know what, you need to be on the ready for a phone call. And on your website, like, yes, you still have websites. You have to make sure, like, you're calling companies that you never called before, right? Me too. Like, there should be numbers. Like, hit a button and send an email. You're all out of your minds. Like, that is crazy. Put your phone numbers on your websites. For some reason, some people have gotten rid of their websites and put them on Facebook. Like, okay, now that Facebook's making you charge to find things, like, start to reevaluate that whole cycle because it's coming back around again.
And so interesting that you say that. I get so frustrated when I have to fill out a form on a company website, and I'm sure this doesn't apply to you all, but I'll go to big companies, whether they're filing for bankruptcy or they're doing something else that's newsworthy when I'm covering a breaking news shift, and they'll say, fill out these 4 boxes and hit enter, and I'm like, where's this email going? So I do find that very, very frustrating. I do go to companies' Facebook pages. I also go to politicians' Facebook pages. Some are better than others when I'm doing stories. I post my stories when they're more general news on Facebook. As I mentioned, in terms of doing breaking news, I did a lot of coverage when Sandy hit. So that week I would post what's going on in your neighborhood regarding Hurricane Sandy. Tell me what's happening. Let me know. So this way at least I can get some leads and follow up on that. So I do use Facebook once in a while for story sourcing, Twitter as well, but I do go to companies' Facebook pages, and often they're terrible, but sometimes they're great and they're really helpful.
Okay, we have time for just a couple of questions, so if anyone has a question. Lisa Sanders.
Lisa Sanders.
Do you have like a morning meeting anymore, or do you have like a a deadline when you have to know what's gonna what you're gonna write about for tomorrow, or is it all real time?
No.
Do you
For us, it's all real time, pretty much. It's all going, like throughout the day. Back in the day, we'd hand in an idea in the morning. Oh, I'm going to do 10 a.m. I think I might do this today. Oh, let me give you an update for the 3 o'clock meeting. Those days are long gone. Now it's literally me emailing out all day long. Hey, this is interesting, and that's interesting. Hey, can we make this for the second or third edition of the paper because this broke late at night? It's a whole new world. Back in the day, I had to worry about the Ad Age daily fax. That was my only deadline in terms of that, and then the weekly publication in terms of stress levels. But now it's 24/7.
All right, 24/7. Literally, I'm on the train. I'm coming here. And I look at the site, and I'm like, oh, something that was supposed to post last night didn't post, so there's nothing new. Natalie literally, from here, wrote a blog post, sent it in, because we needed something fresh for the top of the blog post, right? I mean, it is literally that quick. Now, yes, there are bigger stories that we work on. So you might find us saying, okay, we're going to hold it. And all of a sudden, we're like, oh, my God, we're going to go, right? And that's literally because space has opened up, and we're going to take advantage. So you really need to be flexible, and so do we, about but now we get questions like, oh, when is this going to hit the paper and what time? Like, I don't have a clue what time. Like, it literally is, we're going to put it out. I will try my hardest to give you the heads up at, it's coming out in the next 3 hours, but it's really not like it was. And I think, yes, I wish it was, and it's really not. And I think people just have to get over it.
And I wanted to just add one quick thing. I now not only write the story, I write the headlines, I put in art, I put in video, so multimedia is really, really big with me because we won't post a story without an image to go with it. So rather than me going through the AP photo database, if someone has a new campaign or something that's going on, if you could just send the photo right away, it makes my life much, much easier. Everything's multimedia now.
Yeah, the bigger your art, the bigger your space. Honestly, like when you think of your story, you should think of art first. I am not kidding you. That is number one. Speaking of headlines, we write 5 different headlines now. 5 different headlines, one for SEO, one for the web, one for the paper, one for the blogs. This way it gets picked up. This way your story will travel even further than just the journal, which is just the journal and whatever.
Same thing. We do the same mobile headlines, headlines that go out in terms of the paper, headlines that go out on the cover, on the front page of our website, et cetera. So lots of creativity with the headline writing.
So basically we're on drugs.
I think we should get raises. We should start our own newspaper.
We should.
Last question, if anyone has one.
Thinking about B2B communications, just any thoughts you have on how that fits into the 24/7 when, your customers sometimes sign off, they stop working, they stop thinking about what they need until they get into work the next day. Just how does that fit in for you? Are you following any trends there?
Who's signing off?
Just from a B2B perspective. So like if I stop working at 5 o'clock and I'm not thinking about, what product I'm going to buy or what company, what vendor I'm looking for.
You know what, I hate to say this, people don't really sign off at 5 anymore.
No, especially in B2B.
Yeah, so it is.
5 o'clock is like go time.
Yeah, it is.
Like things, like that's literally when things
Because
start
that's
to
our
get hot.
deadlines for print and our deadline, and you want to get something up as quick as possible. We could spend, I think, 3 weeks talking about this, the work-life balance issue, but from a professional standpoint, it's hard, but yeah, we do need that information after 5 o'clock.
Okay. So, well, I definitely think we heard a lot about what happens in a 24/7 world, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.